right, everybody, welcome. This is Project Herpetoculture Podcast, and I'm your host, Roy Arthur Blodgett, joined as always by the inimitable Philip Leitz of Arids Only. And we have an excellent show for you today. We're excited to dive into it, but before we do, we've got our standard housekeeping. So first, I want to give a shout out to Dylan and the Animals at Home Network for hosting our show. It continues to be a pleasure to be a part of this network. Next, I want to give a shout out to Charlie for editing our audio and keeping us on the rails over here, making this a listenable experience for everybody. Huge shout out to him. We really appreciate him and his help. And next, I want to take this opportunity to talk about our sponsors. So first, we have Custom Reptile Habitats. They've been with us since day one, and they produce premium PVC reptile enclosures. I use them for a lot of the large format vivaria here. They also carry Universal Rocks, Miss King products, and a bunch of other useful stuff. So if you're in the market for any of that and you're planning to make a purchase, consider doing so through the link in our bio or description, and we'll receive a small commission at no additional cost to you. That really helps us keep the lights on over here.
Next, we have Fairy Tale Dragons. This is the collaborative effort between Heather Moy and Ron St. Pierre, both of whom need no introduction and have achieved legendary status in herpetoculture. They've accomplished a lot and produce some of the finest bearded dragons and teliqua in the country, as well as a whole host of other species, including some very interesting emerald tree boa and green tree python projects. Check them out if you're in the market for any of that cool stuff, and be sure to follow along with them on social media. There always is something interesting, and you can learn a lot by paying attention.
Next, we have Cold Blooded Caffeine, and they're roasters of delicious coffees from all over the globe. We have a private label with them, the PH Blend, which is a light roast coffee from Rwanda. It's a great choice for those who prefer more floral coffee with notes of berry and fruit, but they have a wide variety of options for a broad array of preferences. So check them out, and if you place an order, don't forget to use the code PROJECTHERP for 10% off.
We are also very pleased to have the support of Exoterra, a brand that needs no introduction. It's safe to say that herpetoculture would not be where it is today without the influence of Exoterra. For decades, they've been industry leader in innovation, offering just about everything needed for reptile care, from diets and supplements, enclosures, lighting, and substrates. We're both big fans of their naturalistic terraria and substrates in particular, and they have a lot of interesting projects in works as we speak, and we're really looking forward to seeing what comes next.
And last but not least, we have Tamura Designs. For those in the know, Tamura Designs is widely regarded as one of the finest enclosure manufacturers on the planet. They produce outstanding large format vivaria with endless options for customization. Drains, UV printed backgrounds, lighting rigs, and on top of all of that, they also make amazing deli cup displays, and they make these incredible multi-unit condos, which I use a lot here. So if you're interested in any of that and you decide to make a purchase, use the code Herpetoculture for 15% off one item. That's a special offer for our listeners. We're really thankful to all our sponsors for signing on to support the show.
And finally, if you're interested in supporting the show directly, something of a tip or a monthly donation, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Project Herpetoculture. We have a monthly live chat that we host for all of our subscribers that has been a great deal of fun so far. We also have a cool line of merchandise, t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and more can be found on our website. And of course, sharing this show with a friend, subscribing on YouTube, and keeping up on social media is always helpful.
And with all that said, we're on to the show. All right, here we are, episode 72. We got Eddie Soto back. Eddie, how's it going, man?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Pretty good, man.
Fucking great.
Looking forward to chatting.
Wait a minute. So okay, we don't have to start with a question. I want to know, like, how are you going to take credit for me and Roy meeting? Just out with it.
Okay. So first off, it was Phil who was like, "Hey, there's this dude, this British dude named Roy," and I was like, I'm hearing him say his name, and then he says his last name, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've talked to this dude on the phone before. This fucker does not have a British accent.
That's
So I'm
right.
like, but at the time I didn't know where Roy was from. I just assumed, like, I was thinking like Oregon. I was thinking some Washington State. I didn't think California. I don't know. I just assumed Roy was like some wild man in like that part of the world.
Yeah.
I think I always saw him in like flannel, so I just assumed, that part of the area. So, but when you said, it's some British dude across, I was like, wait, what the fuck are you talking about? And again, prior to that, I think I talked to him like maybe 3 months before we had that conversation.
Yeah.
And then you made me even question, because no one else, Ron didn't talk to him.
You're totally right.
No one had talked to Roy before. And I was like, man, I know this is the same guy we're talking about.
Didn't I say that? Because that's right. Didn't I like say on Dylan's show? I was like, oh yeah, Roy, that dude over in the UK. Didn't I say that?
No, it was on the four Herp Men of the Apocalypse.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's right. It was on. Yeah, that's right. The one that we were doing with Paul.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh my God. Yeah.
And I was the only one at the time who had talked to Roy, and I forgot what Roy and I had talked about. But I was like, wait a minute, I'm not crazy. This dude spoke like a normal American.
Yeah. Right. It could have been, in fairness, he could have been an American living in the UK.
He could have been. But anyway, I want credit for your ongoing relationship.
Dude, look, full credit to Eddie Soto.
Credit.
Like full credit.
It's all because of Eddie, everybody. Just so everybody knows, you heard it here.
Yeah. Eddie,
I appreciate it.
Eddie's the real origin story of the Project Herpetoculture podcast is Eddie Soto calling my bullshit on another podcast.
Yeah, and you're like, you know what? You're like, you know what, man? I'm gonna do a podcast with that guy now.
Yeah, I did.
I remember too, because I saw that the episode had just come out, and I was messaging you, Eddie, about something.
Yeah, that's true.
And I said like, oh, I can't wait to listen to the episode, and then you just replied back with a Union Jack emoji, and I was like, what the fuck does that mean? I was like, what is that? Because I hadn't listened to it yet.
That's true. That's very true.
I was like, cryptic. I don't know what he's talking about.
And I did not respond at all. I just let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go.
And isn't that the weirdest thing in the world too? Isn't that weird how your mind like this is how I know like I can't really trust my memory sometimes, because I remember being thoroughly convinced that Roy was in England somewhere. I was like, he must be like, again, I'm going to just say this again. Roy Arthur Blodgett is
Blodgett.
It sounds sure. Especially when it's in that order. If it was just Roy Blodgett or Roy Arthur or Arthur even actually Arthur Blodgett would even be more so. But like, you know what I'm saying? But like, I just imagined. I was like, I can just hear it. I'm gonna be like Roy Arthur Blodgett all the way from I was just like, surely he's got to be in England. And
it would only be worse if it was like Roy Arthur Blodgett, like the third.
Yeah, God. Yeah.
And then you would be like, no way. There's no way. He's from America.
There's no way. It's impossible.
Dude's an American? No. Sounds like a red coat.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's better than the first. So I did a podcast with Bill Bradley.
Yeah.
This was years ago. And I was trying to remember Roy's name, and I could not remember Roy's name. And I was like, Arthur something.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Dude with long hair. He was breeding the monkey anoles, and I had a complete brain fart, and I knew that Roy was going to be listening, and I was just so like embarrassed that I forgot his name.
Oh, God.
Fortunately, I do not care about things like that, so it was all good. I just laughed probably.
Yeah, you did. You thought it was funny.
This is so funny because I remember, God, speaking of like embarrassing things, I feel like I've got a lot of them. Like I've kind of got just enough like unadulterated ignorance mixed with confidence to just like walk myself into totally embarrassing moments. And like, so before I had like steady access to the internet and before any social media where I could like look up somebody and what they're up to with herpetoculture, I used to get Reptiles magazine. And I would flip to the very back where you would find all the list of like breeders, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It had to be that little classified section at the back. And man, I called up so many of those people. Like I just would call them and just, I didn't even if I didn't know who they were, like I was like, I don't know who this is because they'd had their phone number,
Yeah.
I would just call and be like, hey, it's, and there was more than one instance when I didn't realize that I didn't know that the person I was calling was like either way ahead or way behind my time zone. And
Oh
so
no.
I'd yeah, dude, I called people like way past 11 o'clock. And then there were people who I called like way early in the morning, like 5:30, 6 in the morning. And it was like landlines, And
Yeah.
dude, even thinking of the term landlines is just blowing my mind right now. Like I remember, actually, I'm going to tell you about one because this is really funny. Back when I was really into bearded dragons, like really, really passionate about bearded dragons, I would call Vicky Dashu of Dashu Bearded Dragons, really great breeders, like old school, or at least they seem old school now. And I, from like the age of like 11 or 12 to the age of 16 or 17, maybe even more, I probably called her 3 times a week just to bullshit about, and she was so kind to me and so nice about like, oh yeah, like she put up with all my dumbass questions about, well, but what is it like? I remember asking her, like, what is it like to have like lizards hatching every day? Like, and what is it like to just be collecting eggs every day? Are you the happiest person in the world? Like,
They're like, if only you knew.
yeah, I know.
If only you knew.
She was, it's actually really funny to think about because she was really cool about being like, well, it becomes a job. It gets difficult. I love what I do, but it's difficult sometimes. And I was like, I remember thinking to myself, there's no way you couldn't be having the best time of your life. And here I am now kind of in the same position and being like, oh, this is also horrifically stressful sometimes. And I hate looking at my electric bill because like from November until like March, it's outrageous. It is astronomical.
I'm in the same boat in exactly the same time frame as you as well.
Yeah, I mean, you remember those, right? Did you ever call people out of the back of those classifieds and make a fool of yourself like I did?
So in the back of the classifieds, it was people's phone numbers. Yeah, because they would pay for the advertisements, but there was also the classifieds for the reptile expos.
Yeah. Yep.
So luckily in Florida, there was one all the time. So I really never bothered anybody, but I would show up at the shows. I think the only person I ever annoyed, but it was yearly. I would annoy the same person every year. It was Phil Tremper every year at Daytona. I had no idea who he was. All I know is this man had, it was like the least impressive table that you would ever see at Daytona. It was literally just a black tablecloth and 10 deli cups. But whatever was in those deli cups were way better than anything at the entire show.
Yeah.
And I would just go to, like, fresh out of high school, I was going to this guy and I was just haggling him down. And I guess I always looked younger than what I was. So I guess he thought I was like a young kid. So I would just, hey, I only have 900. Would you take 900? And he would always his wife would just like look at him and then he would just be like, yeah, kid. Yeah, I'll do it. And then by the third year, he was like, he recognized me. He's just like, all right, kid, what do you want? Like, what do you want to see?
But in the nicest, in like the most friendly Wisconsin accent imaginable.
Oh yeah, he's the most kind, gentlemanly person too.
Yeah. That was long. He doesn't even come to Daytona anymore. That was long ago.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. When I was that age, I felt like really, really jealous of all the people who got to go to those things. Cause all I would see would be ads or little musings about, or I'd read an article where it would say something about something at the Daytona 2003, whatever, I'd be like, what is this? It was like a fabled, in my mind, it was like this totally mythological place to go because I was like, whoa, this must be hardcore. I mean, and now thinking back on it, I'm like, it's probably pretty hardcore, but also pretty wild,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Daytona's fun. I enjoy Daytona. I've been I've been going to Daytona probably 15 years now, straight almost. And then actually not vending, just showing up.
Yeah.
And then for the last probably 10 years, we've been going, like me and my wife and the kids, we would go there and just, we'd get a hotel for the weekend or for the week and just hang out.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
So
Man.
I love
That's
it.
the way to do it.
It's a party show. I'm not going to lie. It's a party show. It's fun. I enjoy it, but no, you'll see some cool people there.
So when you say party show, like can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that?
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been, like, my wife had to check on me while I'm in the shower, just dying. more than a couple Daytonas.
Uh-huh. See, for me back then, it was always like, I had the same, I was in the same boat as Phil. It was like, just like, it was like this mythical thing, Daytona, but it was also like just Florida in general because of the field herping too. Cause I was obsessed with the Caulfield bucks and stuff like that when I was like a teenager. Yeah. I had like snakes and snakes hunting. I still have my original copy and it's literally just in pieces. Like there's just like parts of it left. Cause it's just, I took it with me everywhere. I read it a dozen times at least or something. And I was like, someday I'm going to go to Florida and find an Eastern Diamondback and like all this, all this stuff. And I still have not made it to Florida.
You have to. You guys have to.
We have to. I mean, we have to come to Daytona at some point.
Yeah.
So
it'll happen for sure.
We have a lot of people to come meet down there. It's just it is really funny to think about. I mean, for various reasons. I mean, I think back. I'm sure my dad and my mom would corroborate this, but I remember like being a young child, like 8 years old, something like 7, 8 years old, like with all these different toys and stuffed animals of, various snakes and lizards and frogs. And I would like play games where I would pretend that I had, like, this was my boa constrictor pet that's like 10 feet long. And I would, it had like all these like fantasies about like living that existence. And it's kind of weird because as fun as it is to remember those times, I kind of grateful that I don't have the same kind of like rose-colored glasses that I had on when I was younger about the world that we participate in. Because I remember like it completely blowing my mind that there would be anything illegal going on with animals. I was like, what? Like what? It just it floored me. I mean, I really like, it's funny. In some ways, I feel like I was really, really naive for so many different reasons. And some of it's obviously unintentional. It's just a kid, but it's kind of weird to think, I even remember like, even though there were great opportunities for field herping within my reach here in Colorado, I never thought it was something that was accessible to me. It wasn't until my good buddy Nick ended up taking me out on a herp trip to either here out east to the plains and finding hognose snakes and prairie rattlesnakes and plains milks and whatever, and just being like, oh, like Jesus, there's like reptiles right here. I can go out right here. It never occurred to me. I don't know why, because I've met so many other people who are into herps now who are like, oh, you couldn't keep me from finding that stuff, So, in some ways, I'm actually a little bit jealous of Roy in ways when he brings up these youthful obsessions that were just, in some ways, they just seem like they were more well-formed and more educated and less naive. No, really.
No way, man.
It's
no
fun.
way. I was totally naive to all that stuff too. I remember like when it first occurred to me, that like there was like illegal activity associated with herpetoculture and all that stuff, and being like, oh yeah, okay, like that's where that stuff comes from, or like that's why that stuff's so rare, and like it was all pretty foreign to me. And even looking back too on like experiences that I had like at shows and stuff as a kid, and just being like looking back and be like, oh, like I have a different perspective on some of those childhood experiences now than I did at the time, for sure.
Have you guys ever read the Lizard King?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that,
good.
that opens your eyes a lot to like the kind of the beginnings of how this all started too.
Oh yeah. It's
Some of
weird.
the sketchy stuff.
Yeah. It makes you
some sketchy stuff.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a weird one too where I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say this on air.
Go for
But,
it. Let it out. Let it rip.
I had like a white supremacist group try to recruit me as a teenager at a herp show.
Whoa. It doesn't surprise
Yeah.
me. It doesn't surprise me at all. Like,
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty weird. Yeah. You
Whoa.
know,
Like,
gave
was
me
it was it a booth, like a table, or was
it was it was a vendor who had reptiles, and I was talking to him about reptile stuff, you know, but then he
whoa.
gave me a card and he was like, you should check this out. And it was like a website, and it was like of this like white supremacist organization local to where I lived at the time. And I was like, whoa, God, this is freaking weird.
I mean, yours is a little bit more crazier, but in Florida a while back at the Tampa Bay Repticon show, there used to be Scientologists, a Scientologist booth.
Cool.
Wow.
For whatever reason, Repticon allowed these people, and everyone who rented old school Repticon, they'll remember this. They didn't say they were Scientologists. They started off talking to you about like how you're doing, how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And they would start to talk to you about your energy.
That's the move.
And then they would just out of nowhere, then you realize, oh, you're trying to recruit me into Scientology. And I just thought that was the strangest thing, that Repticon would just, I mean, they kind of don't care, but
Yeah.
I would say probably 5 years straight, there was a Scientologist booth all the time.
It's wild.
That's interesting. I mean, you know, herpetoculture is full of like fringe weirdos, you know, so
That's true.
You got some vulnerable people to recruit in these environments sometimes, I guess.
Yeah.
But
We're broken
it's a bit
people.
trippy, man. It's a bit trippy.
Man,
Anyway.
no, this is, hang on. I got at least one more in this realm.
Okay.
It's not the same. It wasn't like religious or cultural insignificance in any way, but I remember, I'm pretty sure that the way this happened was that I think the guy who, anyway, I'm butchering this. It's hard to, I'm trying to figure out a point to start, but basically there was a dude who I ended up meeting that my mom and I went over to his house, and we went to his place, and I was probably 8 or 9, very young. And he had Neodesha cages in his apartment or townhome, wherever he was, stacked up, like a whole bunch of them. And he had like children's pythons and anthill pythons, like some pretty, thinking back, it's like, these are pretty pricey, pretty cool, kind of rad snakes. And I remember, because I got bit by one of his children's pythons, like it was like a small adult, and he was like, oh, here, check it out. And I like took it, and it like turned and just like smelled and then, and I was like, whoa, like it kind of messed with my mind. And but I think the reason we even got that opportunity, the whole reason I even went over to his house, is because I'm pretty sure he was hitting on my mom, like I'm 99% sure. And my mom was like, for more than one reason, my mom's gay, so she just like was not. It's literally gay. She's actually gay, so it's like she was like, I'm not here for this, It's just funny to think back on some of these weird interactions that you have, and you look back and you're like, oh, that was not at all what I thought it was,
Yeah, man, that's so trippy looking back on that stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. Or the guy.
Oh no.
We got a great guy. Okay. And he won't, there's no way I can't imagine he'll be bothered by this. We have, there's several local reptile shops. And one of the very first one here in Colorado was called Reptilian Haven. And the guy who owned it was a gentleman named Randy Kawamoto. He's no longer with us. He passed several years ago. interesting old guy. And he had a gentleman who worked for him named Rich. And when I was a little kid, I would go into Reptilian Haven when they had, glass cases with, giant albino berms and stuff like that in them and all kinds of crazy stuff. This dude, Rich, had like leather vests and hair down to his asshole, right? Like just long metal hair. And I found out later that it's because he's like a rock and roll guy. He's actually the singer in a Guns N' Roses. He can like cover Guns N' Roses like to a T, which is incredible, by the way. Incredible. But then it wasn't like not much longer. He worked there for like a decade. And when I came in later as like a more adult person, he was totally bald. Like he lost that hair that was all the way down to his butt. He's like a normal guy. He's a really nice guy. Actually, he's around here. He actually runs one of the other local shops. He's a great dude. Just
nice.
funny to think back on some of these folks and like how they've changed over the years. And yeah. So it's interesting stuff. Anyway, let's we'll steer some stuff. Yeah. Anyway,
we'll try and reel it in here.
Yeah.
Eddie, you're back.
Yes, I'm back.
It's been like a year. I think maybe a little bit more.
I think probably more.
Yeah, a little bit more than a year.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like
I don't think you guys were in double digits yet.
No. We were definitely in our first 10, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Somewhere in there. And I mean, I've been watching you through social media, seeing you posting your stuff, and it seems like things have kind of shifted to some degree, but I'm curious, like, to hear it from you. What's changed in your collection and your focus in the last year? I also noticed a recent name change on the socials. I don't know if that's related to anything, but
I didn't think anyone would really notice that. Yeah,
I noticed.
So yes,
noticed.
So there has been, I mean, a lot of things have stayed the same. It's just a lot of expanding. I'm on about an acre, and I'm just taking advantage of that property. So little by little, I'm just kind of pushing my boundaries of what my wife thinks is okay and what I think is okay. So better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I've been doing that. But my focus has always been the same. I'm always doing like the lizard stuff and all the tortoises, but I've been doing a huge focus on like the Lacerta type animals, Lacertids, pretty much all the European stuff, not just your basic jewel Lacertas, but all your in-between stuff that falls in that category. So a huge focus on the Timon genus or Timon genus, which is like the jewel Lacerta where they're from, and then all the smaller Lacertas, which is pretty much there's several species scattered in each place in Europe. And then even the Galoti or Galosha, which is from the Canary Islands. We got those as well. There's been kind of like the kind of a focus. I've always been into Lacertas. I've been breeding Lacertas for 10 years now, on and off. I got my first group of Lacertas from Linda Switzer. I don't know if you guys know who she is.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so she was at this time she was getting out of breeding Lacertas or out of the hobby. I don't know what the situation was. I forgot what it was, but it was probably 2015 that she was just getting out of everything. And it so happened that the moment she was getting out of everything, tax season kind of, showed up.
Let's go.
So I was like, hey, I have this money. And so and this is actually funny. This is the only time I ever actually like asked my wife, like, hey, can I do this? And she was like, sure, do it. So I messaged her and I got her entire collection of the melanistics and a few heads of the lepidus, which is the standard jewel Lacerta.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what I've been doing ever since. And now it's been expanding to all the other stuff like what you guys see now. And a little bit more. And obviously there's more that you guys don't see as well.
Yeah, there has to be, because every now and again you'll put up some post about like, oh yeah, just building yet another row of pens outside. And I'm like, all right, well, I want to see what's in those pens, goddamn.
Yeah. Well, nothing yet.
Okay.
Oh, the ones I just posted? Yeah, nothing yet.
Okay, nothing yet.
Soon.
That's just for the future. That's
The thing is, I'm so busy taking care of animals that I'll go like 2 months, 3 months without posting anything. And then out of nowhere, I'll just go like every day I'm posting something. Several times a day I'm posting something just so people know that hey, I have this. If you're interested, let me know in the future, but I didn't disappear.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, so I want to ask a little bit more about the Lacertids, so I think some of the first times I saw I thought it was Galatea. I didn't know it was Galotia. That makes way
honestly, no. Honestly, I've never heard a person say it.
Oh, okay.
Like I don't know anyone who's ever worked with them personally. I've never heard anyone say it. I've heard Galotia. I have Galotia. I've heard Galatea. What did you just say?
I said Galatea. Yeah.
Galatea. I don't honestly know.
I have no clue.
I have no clue.
I don't know either.
Yeah. Well, so it's all good because I know you've got the Stellani, right? It's Galatea Stellani, and then what's the Galatea? What's the
so like Galotia Galoti?
Yeah, that's right.
But it's so what I have is a subspecies. So it's I'm gonna butcher it. I'm not even gonna try to say it. If you want to see it, just go on my page.
Okay.
But it's a subspecies.
Yeah.
And that's basically they're from
Eisentrautae.
There you go. Good boy, Roy.
Nice.
So they're from. So a lot of people don't realize that the Canary Islands, it's called islands. It's not just one island with a bunch of lizards. It's several islands with lizards on each of them.
Yeah.
So so for me, it was kind of hard, like trying to figure out like where one was and like what the situation was. So like the larger one, the Stellani, is on the main island. So like the Grand Canary Island. I think I said that right. And the other one is from the Tenerife or Tarnif.
Yeah, Tenerife.
Yeah. Tenerife, yeah.
Yep.
And it's cool because I don't know them, but I am in contact with people that followed me. I had no clue. They're actually from those islands.
Nice.
So when they saw me post them, they're like, "Hey, I live here." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So I'm like messaging them like, "Okay, tell me from start to finish what your summer, spring, winter, fall, tell me everything. Tell me the rain. Tell me what's going on."
Yeah.
And it's funny because both people from both islands or separate islands tell me completely different things.
Whoa.
So, interesting.
So like the Tenerife, it's more of like a, I would say kind of similar to Florida a little bit. More vegetation, a little bit more rainfall, high humidity. Whereas the giant species, the Stellani, is more from like a, I guess like picture like the Cyclora Islands, like where the Cyclora are from. Drier, not much rainfall. But the cool thing about them is they're so unlike Lacertidae, it's insane. Right. So their main diet is vegetation, fruit, and some insects. These things go more crazy for, spring mix than they would for crickets, mealworms, superworms, even a pinky mice. If I put that there, they'll like, oh, okay, I'll eat this. But if I put a salad with carrots and veggies and I top it off with some like rapashi, like Pangea, that's crack. They'll go and they'll just destroy all of that stuff.
Wow.
It's very interesting. Dandelion, hibiscus. Actually, they're the main pollinators of where they're from. So it's
wow.
Sorry, I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but am I correct in remembering that they're vocal, right? Like the
Stellani.
Yeah.
When you pick it up, it like squawks.
What?
Which to this day, I don't get used to it. So when it does it, it freaks me the fuck out.
What is it? What does it sound like?
You want to hear it?
Yeah.
It's like, damn. I took a few sips of whiskey. It's like a duck.
Yeah.
So you pick it up and it just makes a little squawk and then it stops. But every time it does it just, I am not prepared for it.
Yeah. It does what it's intended to do.
The other species, it doesn't make really, maybe it huffs and puffs, but I never hear any noises from them. This one does. Every single time I pick it up, it just squawks and scares the crap out of me. They're really cool. They're cool because for the most part, most Lacertidae, doesn't matter if it's the Lacerta or anything in the Timon genus, their care is pretty much the same. It doesn't matter if they're from the UK, France, Spain, the North Africa. Their care is pretty much somewhat the same.
Mm-hmm.
These things are completely different, just completely different.
Yeah. Those are super cool lizards, man. And so what is it, something that just have Lacertas always interested you, or are there, and then since you've been working with them for so long, are there some like virtues around like keeping them that you can like talk a little bit about, that what keeps you interested and involved with them, other than the fact that they're stunning,
Yeah. The only thing I think of, so my wife she was born and raised in Italy. She's actually from Parma. So we went there one time, like we were way before children. And we went there for a wedding, and I just saw the little wall lizards all over the place. And I was like, what the heck? For me, that was crazy.
Yeah.
But for her, she's like, really? Like, it's the equivalent of like you seeing a brown anole. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Brown anole?
Yeah.
It was like the same thing.
Yeah.
And then I did some research, and I found out there's like literally dozens of species of like the one animal. And then the Lacertidae, and then the bigger species. And then when I got home, I did more research on them, and I was just memorized by that species of that classification, Lacertidae.
Yeah.
And then it only took me years later when Linda started posting her stuff, and I started buying it, and then I started just seeing all this stuff. And I also work with a guy. I have a lot of my stuff, I'm not going to lie, is on loan.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily it's with someone who has some of the same interest of reptiles that I do. So like, I'll just show him like a crazy Lacertidae, and he's just like, dude, I've been looking at that too. And we'll get that too. A lot of people think we're crazy because there's really not much attention on the genus, because first off, everyone just thinks jewel Lacertidae. They just think of the Lepidus.
Yeah.
And
Exactly,
again, like I told you, there's dozens and dozens of those animals out there, not just the Taman, but just the Lacertidae, the smaller lizards. I'll never have all of the species. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Even if I wanted to, it would just be like cage space, just the amount that there are. And there's also subspecies in between that, and localities. And
there's some, right? Aren't there some that you just can't even get them, right? Because I swear, I feel like I saw a documentary not long ago that it was highlighting some of the Canary Island Lacertids, and there was one where it was one single large rock outcropping island, and it had this one unique type of Galatea that was like they were black with yellow dots on them. And
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I watched that. It's in Spanish, so you got to, like, unless you understand Spanish, you got to watch it with like the captions.
Yeah, I speak Spanish, so I didn't know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but it's so that species is actually in the same family as the Galatea galoti.
Okay.
Basically the black one. So what I have is the black with the green and the blue spots. What you were looking at, that documentary, is the black with the yellow spots.
Yep.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. And in fact, in that documentary, he had animals that were like 40 plus years old that they had they were already adults, because they were. So in those islands, there's a huge, there's a feral cat population.
Right.
And also people who just have their cats out, and they're actually, and it's funny because both these people that I talked to from the islands, they don't know each other. So they're both telling me like, yeah, there's cats, and they're like fucking everything up, and they're actually putting things in decline. And some of these species, I mean, they're out in the open. They're not really that scared of people. They're kind of just there. So they're not really hiding from anything. There's really not many predators, other than their natural predators are like hawks and falcons and things like that.
Right.
There's really no land predator other than themselves to smaller Lacertidae.
Oh, they each other.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like a bigger species is a baby species of a different type. Yeah, they're going to eat each other.
Yeah.
But they're not equipped for cats.
No.
And, from what both these people are telling me, that the cats are actually putting a dent into those populations. That it's a noticeable dent.
Cats, man.
Cats.
They are such a bummer.
Yep.
Our dude, I actually
Wait.
look at
I think we actually talked about this last episode. I think with you on Eddie, we talked about cats.
Okay. I think I told you the story about my cat. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
That's what made it. That's what made me remember. And I was like,
I'm glad you told me.
wait a
'cause
second.
I was about to repeat that story, so I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, it would have been fine to repeat, but man, cats are like ruthless killing machines. I have
Yep.
three of them now, which like why we ended up getting a third one is beyond me. I don't know what we were thinking.
I told my wife one is too many.
It is a lot. Yeah,
One is too many.
they're assholes, dude. They're assholes. They're the
I'm at this
worst.
age now where I'm like, why do we have a dog? Why do we have a cat? Like, I have become that grumpy Spanish dude that's just like, what? I don't want another dog in this fucking house.
Just so all the listeners understand, Eddie is 37 like me. So he's not even that old. He's just fully embracing the vibe. He's
The
fully,
curmudgeon, man. You gotta embrace your curmudgeon at some age. You may as well just do it early, you know?
I'm a 37-year-old man with 3 daughters, and 2 of them are teenagers and a few years away from being adults themselves.
wow. Yeah.
I feel like I have some mileage.
Yeah, you do. No, sure. I'm not saying that it's like you're wrong to embrace it or anything like that by any means. I just like, it's like I'm like 37. I can't think of 37 as old because then I have to admit that I'm a little old. I can't do it.
Oh no,
I'm not ready.
I'll fully admit it.
Yeah.
But it's funny because when I was younger, like I was all about having dogs and cats. I would just sneak them. I remember being a kid and just putting kittens in a backpack that I found and like brought them home. And then, my parents were like, get this fucking animal out of here. And I've become that person. So like our dog passed away like a year ago, like less than a year ago. And I remember saying like, no more dogs, we're done. And then we're at a reptile show and my ring camera goes off.
Yeah.
And I checked the ring camera because it's going off back and forth. So I'm like, what the hell are they doing? And it's like my wife and my kids walking in the garage and there's a puppy following them.
Oh,
and I'm like,
busted.
And I'm like, these motherfuckers.
They got you.
Yeah, they got me. I got a dog, and the cat we have is pretty cool. It's a British short hair. It's pretty cool. I can't complain about the cat. It's cool.
I like cats. I like cats actually. I think that they're cool, but I do not like just outdoor cats that just raise hell and eat everything. It bugs me. I actually have landmates here and they have 2 cats. And when we were kind of all talking about them moving out here, we were like, you got to build a catio if you want your cats outside.
Oh yeah.
Like the reason why I live out here is because I want to see lizards and birds and reptiles and stuff in my yard. That's why I live out in the country.
Yeah.
It's a big part of it. And I'm not down with having cats just killing all my lizards out here.
Oh.
You know what's the cool thing is? I moved to this property, and when I moved here, it was honestly there was a lot of cats here, and the cats honestly like left all my shit alone. They don't even bother.
Huh.
They were catching the rats that were trying to go to the tortoise food, the Missouri chow, and they were. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but they were helping me out.
Yeah,
they're not my cat. They're not my cats.
Uh-huh.
They're not my problem. But again, they were leaving all my stuff alone.
Okay.
Nice.
So
that's nice. I mean, it is. I mean, it's a complicated relationship, right? I mean, hey, what the hell? Gross. Get that damn
what is that?
reptile out of here.
Disgusting knob-scaled lizard.
Yeah, dude. Xenosaurus numenorum.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's one of the females.
Yeah.
Nailed it. She's not friendly. But she just came over to the front door, and so I just slid it open and she climbed down onto my hand. And now if I try to touch her, she's gonna try and bite me. Oh,
got him.
Those give live birth, right?
They do, yeah. Oh, she's biting me.
Hey, can you guys still see me? This cheap ring light just turned off on me.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, you're good.
No big deal. In fact, actually, I don't know if it's the camera artifact. There's like a halo around your head.
Oh, that's because I'm an angel.
Yeah,
I'm a good boy.
There's no way that's true.
I'm a sweet boy.
So
he's a good boy.
Okay. Oh my God. So I guess one of the things I'm curious, more curious about with some of the Lacertids is like, do you think that they're, other than just the passion that you have for them and the uniqueness about all, because there's so many different varieties. And I know those Stellini, they're pretty big, right? Like there's some pretty hefty lizards.
Yeah, they're a long-lived lizard. So even mine, I recently just got that one. So I got him at, I think he was 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, these are long-lived lizards. So him at 3 years old, he's an adult animal, but he will still get double that size.
Oh my God.
He's still small for that species. Yeah.
I had no idea they were that long lived. I mean, I didn't think they were like a short-lived species, but I didn't know that we were talking quite as long as you mentioned. The first person I ever saw that I noticed was working with those, and obviously it wasn't it was just happened to be the first person I noticed was John Castellanos. He was, and he's kind of, I don't know if you guys either of you have heard of the guy. He's like a slightly older fella who lives out, I think, in California somewhere, but he
is in California.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was going to say he's in the UK, like he's out in, but he's
that part of California.
Yeah. He's every once in a while, every now and again, we'll just like, he'll reach out about some Euros or stuff. Cause he got some Euros from me a long time ago. And I got some stuff from him a long time ago. And I know he's always bred. He's always, I don't know. That dude seems like a rock star. He always seems to do very well with pretty much everything he gets his hands on. But he was the first guy I ever saw who had the couple of the Galatea species. And I was I was super intrigued by them. Like, they're beautiful. They're so cool. And I remember him putting a picture of one of those males, like one of the big Stellini males, and just a meat case of a lizard, man. I didn't realize they're that huge. So
they'll develop huge jowls.
Yeah.
I mean, they can get pretty chunky too. Like the galoti. I mean, honestly, it's a chunky animal. I have to kind of feed a little less with those guys because they're just getting huge.
They just stack.
They just eat everything, and they're just getting chunky.
That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Do you think are they like a decent animal for like pet trade type stuff? Do they calm down, or are they pretty?
So if you look at the documentaries, they're not afraid. They're there, but there's big numbers of them. They're always together. It's like a male, and then you got like a big group of females around them, and then they're like 5 feet away. There's another male with a big group, and they're not really afraid. Mine are kind of terrified of me sometimes, but they're warming up to me.
Okay.
But again, I'm so busy with all the other stuff that I don't have time to sit there and like gain its trust. I'm kind of like, here's food, you're good. Let me clean you up a little bit. Let me check an egg box.
Right.
You fill up water, all that, and then I'm out.
Yeah. Interesting.
So yeah.
I'm always curious because they're so. I always wonder. I have horrible luck with trying to choose animals that are like going to be friendly or relaxed. Everything I have always hates me or runs from me or freaks out. I mean, I get a little bit of good relationship with some of them that have been here for a long time and know that like, oh yeah, that's just that dude just brings greens from time to time. But some of them takes him a long time to calm down here.
Now every other species I have of Lacerta, doesn't matter the genus, they come right to if they're indoors, they come right to the glass. And they're begging, and sometimes I'll open the glass and I'll have the cup of like crickets or roaches, and they'll just jump into the cup. And I'm like, yo, what the hell? They have no fear. The stuff outside, they see it. They immediately see a shadow or they hear me, and then they bolt, and then they stick their head out, and then they see me, and then they come back out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool, man. It's fun to watch them learn how to watch them problem solve and figure out their environment and figure out who's.
Oh no, yeah. No, outdoors is like a whole different thing. I mean, the coolest thing I ever saw outdoors is like I have a group of ranking dragons.
Yeah,
and for a bearded dragon species, they're pretty communal. Like I have multiple males with females all together in one enclosure.
Yeah.
And so you'll just see all of them just chilling out. All 10 just chilling out on a rock, and then a bird will fly over, and then immediately all of them just disappear. Like they just all disappear.
Yeah.
And then one sticks its head out, comes out, and then they all come out. I mean, you would never see that behavior indoors ever.
No.
Yeah, that stuff's so cool, man.
Yeah. So
Any
cool
any
to see that kind of
cloud or
stuff.
anything, any shadow, they immediately tilt their head and they're looking up.
right.
And that goes for all of them, even though Lacertidae do the same thing. It's just cool with the rankings because it's a group, so you see all of them scattered.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was actually going to be another thing I wanted to kind of pick your brain about. I was curious about how if over the last, since we talked last, if you had any kind of different feelings or thoughts around sort of the difference between keeping indoors and outdoors, because I've never kept outside. I've never, it freaks me out. It makes me really nervous. I'm very intimidated by the idea of outdoor keeping.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And on some level, I mean, I have a great deal of respect for it, obviously. It seems like such a wonderful way to go, but it really freaks me the hell out. So I'm curious, like, where your feelings are on it at the moment. And, I have other questions around that too, but
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing outdoor keeping for years before I was even like
yeah,
out there as far as like social media.
Yeah.
It's warm in Florida. It's hot. The sun, nothing beats the sun.
yeah. Why wouldn't you?
No Zoo Med, Arcadia, none of that's going to beat the sun.
Never.
So take advantage of that. The only downside I see about outdoor keeping is people would watch like a clip of someone else who does it, and then they immediately think they can do it. And then you just see disastrous results from that. The things that I do in my yard, my neighbor can't do. The things
Right.
that I'm doing in my yard right now, I couldn't do in my old property. My old property is literally 8 minutes away from here. It's a whole different ballgame. Each situation or property is going to be different than everyone else's. So you have to kind of adjust to where you're at. So all my Lacertidae, all my like the Timon genus, so all the bigger species of Lacertidae, they're all outside. All the Rankins are outside, and for the most part, these are more arid animals. They do enjoy some humidity, but for the most part, they're not a tropical type animal. So I have to like adjust to that animal and their behavior. So all my enclosures are there's a foundation first, and then the enclosures are basically on top of that. So if you ever see like any of my enclosures, the very bottom part of the wood is basically a false bottom.
Right.
So that false bottom is filled with rock and some dirt, and then there's holes in the bottom that are drilled. So if it rains, it just goes right out.
Yeah.
So they're still getting rain, they're still getting everything they need, but it just completely drains itself out. Because where I'm at now, there used to be a little stream behind my house, and for whatever reason, the city decided to bulldoze it down. And ever since then, the rain situation it can flood a little bit, nothing major, but enough where an arid animal is going to get respiratory if you don't act fast.
Yeah.
So, and these are things that people don't realize. They see someone else do it on YouTube, and then they immediately replicate it almost to the T, and then they fail. So the way I keep things outside is going to be different than if they see someone else who also lives in Florida. Like everyone's going to be different.
Right. Makes sense.
Do you find that what would you say is like the hardest element to manage about outdoor keeping? Is it just weather? Is it the weather, the primary thing that's like the most? Yeah. That's going to be it, right?
It's weather. Weather's the main thing. I mean, anything in between as far as like predators and security, as far as if the animal can escape, that's a human error. That's our fault. But weather you can't predict.
Yeah.
Not at all. I mean, I have the weather app. Like if there's a change, like I'm on it. Like I know what's going on. So right now, all my Lacertidae are outside. They're in their enclosures. I do have plastic over them. But for the past month, the plastic they don't have the plastic actually on there. It's just every winter I have it ready. It's there. But it's been, their cages have been completely uncovered for the last month. And honestly, the only reason I have the plastic on them is for the rain factor. They could not care less of how cold it gets in Florida. Right now, this winter has been very wet, very wet, very, very wet. And that's the only issue that I've been running into. So wet and cold is a disaster for pretty much every species. I don't have to worry about wind because the way the cages are set up, I don't worry about the wind. But the rain factor is a huge issue. And then with Lacertidae especially, if they get too much rain, they'll start getting the bumps all over their bodies, and they'll just get respiratory, and then they'll crash on you. So yeah, that's the only reason I have the plastic, is just because of the wetness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wild, man. It's crazy. I have a couple of friends who keep outside in Arizona, and it's like, it's the same thing, but in the opposite direction. They're always having to worry about the heat, like it's always heat. It's always managing the heat, making sure that they can get away from the heat, making sure that you can cover.
I mean, that's also important. Like all my enclosures, no matter the species, they can escape the heat. They can go underground. So how the cages are, I mean, it's still somewhat underground, so they can go under and hide, and they can bask when they need to.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You want to make sure that they can fulfill all their needs that they would do in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
Bask, rest, hunt, just and forage.
Yeah. Yep. Right, for sure. Something, you mentioned the having the rankins and keeping them in a big group, and I know I've been real vocal for a long time about like keeping Euros solo and in general and stuff. There are some exceptions to that, like Euromastix JRI, which is the Nigerian Euros, the orange and yellow ones that come in all the time. They seem to be, on average, like a little bit more tolerant of group living.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they just seem a little cooler about it. I don't know what causes that. I don't know why that is. But I've also had theories too that there might be an element of like the way a cage is constructed or set up that kind of gives them more or less of a tolerance for cage mates. And I don't mean necessarily multiple basking zones. I don't necessarily mean like lots of places where they can get away from one another. I'm not even talking about that, because I have constructed situations where there are all of those things are met, where there's multiple places for animals to bask that are not in view of one another, and multiple retreats and refuges where only one animal can get in there and get to, right? The other animal can pursue it. And I've never been able to make it work here for me, but I can point to other people who keep similar stuff, who do manage to keep some of the animals that I can't keep in groups. They manage to keep them in groups. And I'm wondering, I've kind of had this thought that maybe there's another element of like, that I'm not considering, like maybe like a perspective, maybe like the point of view looking outward from inside the cage has something to do with that. Maybe like, maybe if you set up the enclosures where they're like a little less than perfect, maybe they're just going to tolerate one another more because the territory is not valuable enough to fight over, or something like that. And none of this is fleshed out in any way in my mind, but it's just something that I've been bouncing around a lot. And I was curious if you had any thoughts or feelings about that, or if that sounds like bullshit to you. I'm really curious.
So rankins, I just think they just tolerate each other as a species. I just think that's just how they are. If you were to do that with just regular like Viticeps, like the central, the stereotypical, the common bearded dragon in the country, it would be a bloodbath. Those males would find each other in seconds, and it would just be a bloodbath.
Right.
The rankins, they're just not like that. Each one has their own rock, and they're on that rock. And occasionally they'll make eye contact with the other one that's on the rock, and they'll just bob their heads.
Right.
And that's it. It's peaceful. I've had zero issue with anything. There's never been an issue of them fighting each other. And the females all like, and it's funny because each female kind of has like their own, like, this is where I hang out. This is where this female hangs out. I don't see any issue. I mean, I'm not there witnessing this. I'm not there sitting and watching everything going on, but I don't ever see them really intermingle with each other. Like this female goes over here. The only time I ever see them kind of congregate is there's one main nesting area, and they all go to it. They all go to the nesting area to lay their eggs, and then in the winter they all go there to brumate. Every single one of them goes and they just dig.
Okay.
And no issues at all. Again, I think people are looking too much into it, and you really got to look at the species as a whole. Rankins, you can do that with. I would never do that with like a barbatus, or I would never do that with a viticeps. You would be missing body parts, and you would just probably have one less dragon.
Okay, so
and then even female bearded dragons, they'll fuck each other up too.
Sure.
Rankins, I don't see that.
All right. So all right, now this is going to be interesting because I have a couple of reasons or thoughts about maybe some other context, right? Because I have kept and bred Rankins, but not anywhere near as much as you, but I've messed with them. And I love Rankins. I think they're so rad. And I really like the Barbata. I really wish that I could eventually one day, I'd love to keep Barbata because I just think they're so rad looking. With Viticeps, and again, you're dead on about like the species matters, right? Like the social construction of that individual species matters so much. And you look back at Bob Mayu at Sandfire, what he was doing back in the day, he was keeping big outdoor pens.
Yeah.
And he had two males and 4 females or whatever, two. I don't remember the exact ratio, but I remember there being multiple males in the cage. And damned if that guy didn't make it work. And they were so pretty. He had such lovely, well-constructed dragons. And I had a theory for a while that like there was a point in the dragon trade. And again, I want to be careful when I talk about this stuff because it's not as if I was plugged in. Admittedly, there was a long time where I was thoroughly obsessed with Pagona viticeps. That was my entire worldview. Like I didn't give a damn about any other reptile other than Pagona viticeps for a long time. But I don't want to pretend like I was locked in thinking at the highest level about this one group of animals. So I'm not trying to make broad statements here. It's just a perception. But there was a moment where it felt like breeders got really, really interested in males that were aggressive breeders. Like people would brag about they would brag about like this male, he's just such a savage. Like I can't keep him with any other animal. He just breeds. He's like a machine, like there's people all about this porn star bearded dragon or something, he's like the fucking dude. And I never, I don't quite get that, but it seemed as though there came a moment where there were more and more male dragons in the industry that were just super aggressive breeders and kind of outcompeted a lot of the other ones that were less aggressive and even females, right? Like when I was keeping and breeding dragons, I would keep groups of females together. I never saw gnarly aggression between them. They would bob and wave at each other, but if they never seemed to fight or bicker, they never seemed to have issues with one another. Males would never, in fact, I even remember having one male years and years ago who didn't want to breed at all. And it was really weird. Like I remember being totally perplexed by him. I saw him one single time in 8 years of life get a black beard and bob his head one time. He never made it. There were multiple females that were kept with him throughout the years. He never bred with them. And it was super weird. And again, this is an anecdote. It's not data. It's anecdata. But it's just something I wonder about. I mean, do you think there's any validity to the idea that maybe we kind of like populated the trade with males that are aggressive as shit and females that were kind of aggressive as shit? Do you think that's nonsense? I'm real curious.
I gotta be careful what I say now.
Damn it.
I think in the reptile world, not just bearded dragons, I think we attribute aggressiveness to good breeders. Or just good survivors.
Yeah.
Even with snakes, the snake that's nippy and trying to get you, like that's the animal that would survive in the wild. It's going to be the best breeder.
Right.
Same thing with the dragon. Same thing with the lizards. That's going to be our best breeder.
Yeah.
So everyone goes to those animals. And honestly, in the wild, those would be the rock stars in the wild. Honestly, I couldn't even tell you, but yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. So this is near and dear to my heart, man. This is like, to me, this is what it means to be an imperfect selector. like we are the ones choosing
Yes.
animals,
Yeah.
and our conceptions around what we think is going to be, oh, that's the hardy one, that's the animal, that's the killer, that's the one that would have survived in the wild. Maybe it would have gotten eaten by a bird, like we don't know, right? Like
there's a lot of variables.
Yeah, there's so many variables.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, totally.
Even if we exclude that, even if we take out the fact that there are so many variables outside these doors that we can't really account for, even then, there are subconscious factors that are going to cause us to keep and favor one animal over another. And there is you
got color, size,
everything,
temperament.
And surely, there are going to even be more things where it's like we don't even pay attention. Like it just so, because, like when we talked with David Ian Howe, the ethnokinologist, and he studies the evolutionary relationship between dogs and humans, and surely there were things that proto dogs did that we didn't even know. Like it just so happened that we liked when that one dog cocked its head to this direction. We thought it was super cute. Didn't even realize keeping that one, it just happened. So there are all these like byproducts of like, oh, well, and stuff that we might not even realize. Like, what about the possibility that there are reptiles whose, for some reason, the microbiome makeup of that particular individual handles the kind of food that we feed them here more easily than their wild counterparts. And we didn't even know. But it just so happens that that's the one that did better. So we're selecting that one. We're going to keep that one. And we then artificially make the leap that says, oh, that one's killing it. That one would have survived in the wild. It's like, it might have just been an accident, right? It could have been a total fluke. And, I've brought this up so many times now, and I hate to repeat myself too much, but I have this thing going on with some of my Euros, where some of them, the tail whorls, they're normally the spikes, they're normally shaped like a little shield that has like a little spike jutting out the top. That's what a Euro tail whorl looks like, right? Just like lots of other spiny-tailed reptiles. Well, I've got some where there's some kind of deformity going on where the scales are kind of bowing in and upward like this. They're like concave. And I can't figure out what's causing it, right? And it's not all of them, right? It's just some. But why are those ones getting it, right? And why are these ones not? They're kept under the same conditions with the same diet, same lighting, same everything, and yet some of them are getting it and others are not. And there's a part of me that my gut tells me there's a flaw in the way I'm keeping that's yielding that result, and I'm still pretty convinced that that's what's going on. But I'd still be really curious to know why this one and why the one right next to it is not getting that. Why is that? And that could also be something where it's like, maybe that's just this one genetically is not as predisposed to it as that one is. Like it's I don't know. I've kind of gone on a rant. I want to give you guys some room to get in here.
I feel like the only species that we're going to really see those results are the bearded dragon, the common Viticeps. That's the one that's mostly bred in captivity. You take a ball python, doesn't matter the morph, it acts like a ball python. Lacertidae, they act like a Lacerta. A captive bred bearded dragon versus one in Australia, two different creatures. Two completely different creatures. I think with the way that bearded dragons are being bred in captivity, what you're saying, you would see those results.
Well, and wouldn't it be more ethical, right? If we're going to take as a given that the ethics are like, it's more ethical to have an animal that does well, that, one of the main reasons I'm working with Xenogamma taylori is because I think it's really, really easy to provide a very high baseline level of care for a lizard that's that long. It's real easy. And they're really super tough, and they're fun, and they're intelligent, and they're friendly, right? so we'll make some choices that say, well, I'm going to pick this one because they're obviously a great candidate for it. But let's take the leopard gecko, right? Leopard geckos have probably been bred in just as many, if not higher numbers than bearded dragons, because they're so easy to reproduce and they can be kept in such spaces and whatever. And
they're prolific.
Yeah, really prolific. Wouldn't it make sense? Wouldn't it make ethical sense to select for animals that do well in the conditions that we provide them? Because it's the right thing. Like, if you do well in these conditions and you're thriving and you're kicking ass and it's easier to provide for you, and this one over here, like, this one's not going to be happy until I put it in a 10-foot cage. Well, you know what, bro? Like, people can't give their bearded dragons 10-foot cages. I mean, maybe it makes more sense. And again, this is probably highly fraught, right? Because you should be striving to give your animals the best instead of forcing them into the confines of what we can provide for them, right? I mean, but no matter what, there's an upper limit to what we can do on average. And there's going to be that tug of war between the upper limits of what the average keeper can do and the kind of welfare we want to provide for the animals that we're keeping, right? So it just seems like it's only reasonable. And I'm really, really interested in this idea that, like, the sort of unintended byproducts of what we do with these things, like, because they're all going to be there. They're going to show themselves in, I mean, Christ, dude, you look at any desert herbivore, whether it's a Euro or a chuckwalla or a tortoise, the food they're eating out there looks nothing like the pile of sopping wet veggies that we throw into their pens every morning, right? But it's like, and yes, we're always going to be needing to, like, how do we steer towards giving this something that's a little bit more natural and a little bit better and suits them a little bit better? And I'm not going to have a farm of acacia trees where I harvest the leaves and the flowers and feed them to my ornate uromastics indefinitely. Like, that's just not conceivable. So like, I think right now you're right in that it's probably only the bearded dragon, the leopard gecko, maybe the corn snake, maybe the crested gecko eventually. Some of these animals that have been bred in such high numbers, surely there's going to be stuff where it may be present already and we don't even realize, like lots of things that we don't know. That's a byproduct of all those selection pressures we put on those things. And that high breeding rage to me always seemed like a standout. But again, that could be just purely.
Listen, all I know is you take a captive bred bearded dragon, you put it in the wild. There's no hammock. There's no couch. It's going to die.
I mean, but okay, but hold on. But why? Okay, maybe because Sandfire is when Bob Mayu was breeding all those dragons out at Sandfire. That was outdoors in California, right? And so either A, they had the most incredible track record of never having an escapee, or B, what you're saying is also accurate in that any escapees that ever managed their way out of that facility got eaten right away or died pretty quickly. But I don't know. I don't know if I buy that. I don't know if I believe that if you took 1,000 of the bearded dragons that we hatch right now.
If they were at Sandfire, they would have a better chance of living than if it was like my neighbor who has a bearded dragon and that escaped.
Yeah, for sure.
Sandfire will more likely know what to do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they'll figure it out.
The Sandfire dragon is going to run to the nearest tree or bush or whatever.
Yeah.
Wait, scope, see what's going on, and then decide from there.
Yeah.
My neighbor's bearded dragon is just going to, like, sit in plain view of everything.
Right.
And wait for whatever it's waiting for.
Yeah.
And get immediately just mauled by a cat, dog, bird.
Yeah.
Who knows what.
Yeah. Well, because and the other thing I think about when this comes to mind is, like, feral dogs, right? My mom had his name was Oliver. We called him Wendell because Oliver Wendell Holmes, the Supreme Court justice. But anyway,
Mhm.
his name was Oliver, and he was what was called a potcake dog. And they are the sort of the weird random amalgamation of wild dogs in like the Bahamas. And
Okay.
and I think sometimes like, okay, those dogs were descended from all these weird, stupid breeds and other breeds that we think maybe they wouldn't, because like my dog Lilu, she's a golden retriever. There's not a chance in hell she survives if she gets out. Like if she got out there and tried to make do, I don't buy that she could make it through. Now Dalva, Roy's dog, Dalva's gonna make it. She's gonna be just fine. She's gonna catch stuff. She's gonna survive. Yeah, you say that, but I got a feeling she's plenty capable.
She could definitely do it for some period of time. She could definitely hunt.
Yeah.
And a problem sometimes.
Yeah. I don't know. I just kind of feel like there's a lot of the information that we all inside of herpetoculture we all kind of talk about and recycle that I just feel like, and I'm not saying, and I should just be clear, Eddie, I'm not saying you're like recycling stuff that I don't agree with. I'm just saying as a side here, like the whole invasive species are a problem and it's all because people letting their pets go. It's like, well, but we also have all these other reptiles that you move them from their home ranges and they die instantaneously. Yeah. It's like, well, which is it? And is it only some that are more tolerant of moving and others that are not? Oh, if we generate a captive population, then it'll reduce the demand on wild populations. Okay, ball pythons. There's more than enough of them here and they're still pulled out of Ghana and Togo by the tens of thousands every single year, right? So it's like, that doesn't quite add up. It doesn't quite line up, right? I don't know. I feel like there are quite a few of these things where it's like we agree with some of these statements in isolation, but then when they're counterposed against each other, it's like, well, that doesn't add up. Like, why is that happening? I don't know. Now I feel like I'm ranting. I feel like I should.
I mean, there's just so many different variables. There's some species that are just really adaptable and resilient and capable of becoming invasive. And then there's so many that are not, it's like, it's weird. I was thinking earlier, we're talking about the Canary Islands. Isn't there like an issue in the Canary Islands with invasive California king snakes?
What?
I think it's in the Canary Islands. It might be a different island, but somewhere there's a problem where basically there's an invasive population of California king snakes that are wreaking havoc. And they were from pet trade animals that escaped and then actually established population. And that's like a weird example of like where it actually did happen, it can happen. But it's unlikely to happen with a lot of these species that we're working with that are just so far outside of the range of tolerance in terms of what they can expect in environmental conditions and thrive in.
You're totally right. Yeah. It's the cow king was first detected free living in Gran Canaria in 1998.
Yeah.
So that's the main island. That's where the Stellana is from.
Crazy. Yeah, it's a really trippy thing. It's like a really unusual example, of a snake becoming invasive. Obviously there's like brown tree snakes in Guam is another famous example. But like, it's pretty uncommon for that to happen. And it's also interesting that in both of those examples, it was island populations,
right?
Where they were limited geographically. And I wonder if that, intensified the impact on some.
Well, most island animals have no to little predators at all.
Exactly. Right. They're so isolated, geographically that they don't have those kinds of.
Guam their entire bird population got wiped out from the snake that you're talking about.
Yeah, the brown tree snake.
Right.
Yeah,
brown tree snake.
Bariga.
Yeah,
it's super, super interesting stuff. So I think that it's just so complicated, so variable what can happen. And I think that like, for example, I have a lot more concern about like what like Zach has mentioned, Zach Lopeman has talked about this with like the Burmese pythons and the Everglades. Okay, it's like the pythons are one thing, but it's also like it's scary what the pythons are carrying in terms of the pentostomes, like these parasites that they're carrying internally that are actually, those are having a huge impact on native snake species. They're people, there's like just a study that someone did where they were literally out finding dead snakes and finding out that it was from pentostomes. It's like, how often are you out in the field and you're like finding adult dead snakes, that are just out there, which is pretty freaky considering like, well, how many are you not finding that are like under cover of some kind dead and, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
I think it might've been, I want to say it was Mike Lorett. And if it wasn't, my bad. This is like what my memory says. I swear he posted, it might've been him or it was somebody else who was living in Florida, posted a picture of like a boa constrictor, like a Colombian red tail, and a Brazilian rainbow boa that he had just like found somewhere in the Everglades. And you're just like, good. Like, it's like perfect.
So supposedly there is a population of rainbows out there. So
yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Which is crazy, but
not that crazy.
It's also crazy too when you think about like some of these species that are invasive or that can establish populations can also be species that are actually hard to keep in captivity. And like the one example of it is actually the polychrus, the marmoratus. There's a population of those somewhere in Florida.
Really?
That have established themselves. And yet like they're difficult to establish in captivity. They're just not easy lizards to start with. I think the captive bred are fine, but wild caught polychrus are rough to establish, and yet there's an established invasive population.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Same thing with
super weird.
Yes, the butterfly agamas too. The Leolepis belliana.
Yeah, smaller species. Yeah, they're here.
There, and it's pretty remarkable. It's funny to think about the invasive thing, because I think I've mentioned this before, but I went last summer. My wife and I went to this trout hatchery up in Mount Chabonneau up here in Colorado in the mountains, and it's like maybe it's like 2 hours west of me, and it was pretty cool to go visit. And I took like a tour and I talked with some of the folks that work there. It was really cool facility and really interesting to see what they're up to. And I remember them talking about, oh yeah, we have like albino trout and leucistic trout pop up all the time. We even get this one random blue trout that pops up, all this crazy stuff that just happens. And they were talking about how one of the reasons they are even tasked with managing fisheries is because of whirling disease, which was introduced by sport fishing fish that had just been put into the natural ecosystem. And yet, there are all these trout that are just bred and every single year introduced into, they're non-native trout, rainbow trout, brown trout. They're not native to here, right? And I mentioned I've been getting into fly fishing, which is like, again, super old thing to do. But there are sport trout fisheries all over the world now where they never used to be. Like Iceland is a beautiful New Zealand, Patagonia. None of those are native, but but we're all cool with it because you're like it's kind of weird. Like it's
super weird, man. The fisheries is a really weird, especially when you get into like trout and salmon, too, because they're also like they're essentially like programmed to return to their natal streams too.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what do you do with like animals that have genetics that are totally from somewhere else and they get confused, and it's all just so weird.
And they manage. They like reproduce. Yeah. Wild. They figure it out, and then they, life finds a way.
Finds a way.
There we go.
Glad we connected on that one, Eddie.
Yeah, I'll tell you an invasive story that always makes me laugh to this day. Again, this was back when I was in Italy. They knew I was like a reptile guy, so they're like, "Oh, you got to go to this pond. It's filled with turtles. It's just filled with turtles. You got to come see it." So I'm like, "Oh, cool. I'm in Italy. I want to see what turtles look like in Italy."
Yeah.
I go, and it's
red-eared sliders.
Nothing but red-eared sliders. Nothing but red-eared sliders. And I was so upset. Not like I was just like, oh crap. Like I wanted to see something cool that I've never seen before. And but the thing is, in every place I went to in Europe, red-eared sliders. I think I saw like in one place I saw one native species basking. Everything else was red-eared sliders.
Yeah.
And they were so excited to show me these fucking turtles.
Yeah. I see them here. Like I've seen big female red-eared sliders like out crossing the road, getting ready to go out to nest.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not a pond turtle. There's no freaking way.
And in Florida, Florida's pretty bad because they hybridize. And when they do hybridize with our native species, that cross doesn't really look like a cross. It looks like a red-eared slider. It's pretty hard. Like, unless you're like, what you're looking for. The moment it has a red, like the red ear is always going to be like the main thing that always pops up.
Right.
But yeah, they're everywhere.
And
there was one time I had a yellow belly. This was in my old property. There was a yellow belly that laid eggs, and I was like, oh, let me dig these eggs up. It'd be cool for the kids to watch. And you would have sworn that a red-eared slider laid those eggs because everything that hatched out looked like a red-eared slider.
Wow.
I mean, they were obviously crosses because it was a yellow belly slider that laid them. But I mean, there were slight differences in variability between the entire clutch. But for the most part, if you did not pay attention to subtle markings, you would have thought this was a pure red-eared slider clutch.
Right. Well, I mean, talk about another way to spin this is that red-eared sliders are the very high evolutionary success, right? They had the right combination.
They're programmed to do what they're meant to do.
They do what they do, and
highly successful.
And they were the sort of unintended recipients of whatever it is that we were fascinated by. Like humans were like, I love that damn turtle. That's the one, and they managed to spread. I mean, it's kind of dark and kind of weird, but
and to their detriment. I mean, even in captivity, if you give them a 10-gallon tank and not even a light and never change the water and feed them cat food or hot dogs, they'll live. I mean, they'll look terrible. I mean, I've seen cases where someone brings me a red-eared slider and it is this fucked up creature that should not be alive, but they survive. They do really well. They're really well. I mean, I have a picture. It goes way back to probably like 2009 of someone giving me a red-eared slider, and this thing was fucked up. And they kept it in a 20-gallon. The damn animal was 20 years old, and they fed it minnow, like saltwater minnows. I forget what silver sides. They fed it frozen silver sides and hot dogs. And this damn thing lived, but the shell was eroded and small, and the legs, the tail, the head completely just did not fit inside that shell. Like it didn't even look like it should be together. The shell itself looked like it was dissolving. It was bad. It was really bad. I mean, there's certain animals that just to their detriment, they survive no matter what we put them through. And it's not just reptiles. I mean, even fish like the Oscar.
Oh yeah.
Oscars are one of the most fucked up fish. You can, no matter what you do to them, they'll live.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I'll never forget this. I was at, there was a pond. There was like a local pond. That was a part of like the Little Dry Creek Trail here in Colorado. And there was like this artificial pond that had been set up that me and my friends all used to call Bubble Pond. I have no idea if it was actually called that, but it was like a, I don't know, 7-minute bike ride from the house that I grew up in. And there was an era when I realized that there were like some various fish in that pond. You know, there's some big bluegill, some bass, and then some chub and some other stuff. And I went over there in the spring and I was fishing in that pond. And I look into the water and I see 2 or 3 huge plecostomus just crushing through that pond. And I was like, that's not supposed to be there. You know, I just remember that it's wild. There's another guy. I'm sure
they're all over Florida, by the way,
everywhere.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember. there was this guy. There's a guy named Charles C. Mann. He's an author and kind of like a prominent thinker of sorts.
That's a fake name, by the way, right?
Huh?
That's a fake name?
No, I don't think so. I think it's Charles C. and then Mann. I don't think so. I think that's his real name. It's weird.
Okay.
Anyway, it sounds fake. I'm right there with you, man. It sounds like nonsense.
It sounds fishy.
Oh, oh man, that was really.
I haven't drank that much.
But
he's a good author.
Yeah, he's great.
1491.
Yes.
A lot about the Americas before Columbus, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's
pretty cool.
Super cool. Yeah, really, really interesting. And I listened to a lecture he gave, and he was talking about how he was talking about our conceptions about, like, we have a myopic conception of the way the world was or always was, right? So we hear about this a lot, through, you'll see pictures of people, holding up fish from 100 years ago and be like, our fisheries used to be crazy. And I mean, admittedly, they did. They used to be pretty surreal. But also the idea that the fisheries were unaltered at that point is nonsense. He was talking about how the ballasts in ships that used to sail continent to continent were some of the first things to bring invasive species to the North American continent, because the ballasts of the ships would either be water or soil. And the soil that they used for the ballasts was what brought the earthworm to North America. And that something like 70% of the flora and fauna in the San Francisco Bay is non-native, and it would come from when the ships would empty the water that they were using in the ship into the bay. And it's just, there's all these, you know what I mean? And it's like, again, we were talking before about unintended consequences of our choices. It's like that nobody would have called that, or I mean, I guess you could have. You possibly if you had a pretty open aperture, but that's weird. Like, that's super freaking weird. And it makes me really, really curious about the way the world's going to look in a few hundred years. Like, I bet it's going to look fucking trippy. There might be some wild, weird little environments all over the world. And I mean, who knows? I'm sure a lot of it's going to be not good, but some of it surely might be kind of cool,
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the destruction. I am.
Oh, damn. All right. That's not what I was thinking.
An
Okay.
accelerationist.
Yeah.
Well, Eddie, what else are you working with these days? What's got you like excited and interested in terms of herpetoculture? Anything new?
I don't know. I do it every day, so I don't know what's new to me.
Right. Yeah.
Good point.
I don't know.
You're just steeped in it, man. You're in the cloud. You can't see the shape it's taken.
No. Again, the end game is my entire yard.
Yeah.
When we bought this house and the property, I'll give a lot of credit to my wife. She saw this house. She saw that it had a separate building. She saw the yard, and she was like, "This would be perfect for what he does."
Yeah.
Because I had no, I don't know. I had no drive to search for a place. None at all.
Right. Yeah.
And she was like, "Okay, this is perfect." And the deal was nothing inside the house, but the yard and that building go crazy. So the only thing that's in here is an incubator. That's the only thing that's in the house is an incubator. The garage is almost full. The yard is probably 25% full. I still have like a whole section of the yard that I'm just going to take over. I've got the tortoises. I got the 2 big aldabras.
Yeah.
What else? And then again, I'm just going to keep building more cages. So,
right.
Who knows?
So maybe another way to maybe add to that question is, other than expansion, what are, or you can, and also maybe also including expansion, what do your goals look like for the next 3 to 5? Like, what are some things you want to be doing in that amount of time?
So I do want to popularize some of the odd species that I have, things that I see that could be a good candidate for a pet, not just for my own benefit, but just for the benefit of just like, hey, here's a cool alternative to this, or here's a cool alternative to that. That's one thing I want to do. I'm currently working with Timon nevadensis, which is it's in the same genus as like the jewel Lacerta lepidus, and I think they're superior to lepidus. From what I see, they're much larger. Even my females are larger than the lepidus males. Wow. They're much calmer. I mean, they're not bright, brilliant green. They're not emerald green with like giant blue spots. I mean, they're kind of a little duller, but that animal, I think, would be a much better candidate if you were to compare a jewel Lacerta to that. That's one species I'd like to popularize. And the other thing is I just don't want things to just disappear. Like, oh, I used to have that, but now it's no longer in the country. Like, I kind of just want to make sure the species is represented in a good population in captive hands. Because I can tell you, there's several species that I've had that no longer have an existence in. I mean, they have an existence in captivity, but they don't have an existence in the U.S. captive hobby. One example was the Peridora masobi. At one point, I think I had like 6 of them. Mm-hmm. And they were doing great. Never got eggs from them, but they were doing great. Boring animal, very, very boring animal, but a stunning animal. But they were the holy grail of like geckos at one point. Probably still are. I don't know. And they just didn't fit the need of like, they just, when you get an animal, like a holy grail animal that you think you love, and then you get it and you're kind of like, oh, you're not what I expected. Well, that was the masobi gecko. Yeah. I was like, wow, this is totally not what I expected. So I sold the group off, and then whoever bought them, I think they did the same, and then they split it up, and then eventually those animals just perished. I don't know if there's representation of that animal in the U.S. population at all. In Europe, there is. Yeah. But in America, I don't think there's any.
That's a bummer. It's kind of weird. I wonder about, again, speaking kind of around this theme of like unintended consequences or unexplored idea. I wonder. I've been a little bit critical of the idea that we have any real reason to preserve, obscure species in the trade, and the reason I had that perspective was related to the idea that like, okay, if there's not a market for something, then it doesn't necessarily like it's kind of unethical in some ways to propagate that animal because it's like nobody really wants them. It's like why make a bunch of things that are unwanted?
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think there's also probably a coherent argument that goes something like it's impossible to predict the preferences of future people, right? So like it's entirely possible that in 20 years people will really want Periodura masobi, and they what seemed boring or maybe not what you were expecting to you might be a dream to some future.
Yeah, and that's an animal that I think about a lot because even though I didn't find it, I mean, visually it was appealing. It was the holy grail even for me. But even though eventually I felt like it was not what I wanted, I got rid of. To this day, I feel like I should have just kept it. Hindsight, obviously. I should have kept it and did my best to breed it and spread the species. So that way there is some sort of representation in the hobby. Because honestly, it was probably like a week ago, someone posted, I'm part of a Peridura group on Facebook. And someone posted like, are there any Peridura masobi in the US? And this one dude, just all he wrote was no in caps. And that was the end of the thread.
Oh man.
And a part of me wanted to be like, well, I probably had the last group. And then I was like, no, you know what? I'm not even going to bother. But things like that kind of bothered me. It was like, what if I just kept them? Even if I didn't really enjoy them, what if I just kept them just to keep the species going?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, but again, it's hindsight.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I think about that a lot. I often think back to when I worked at that same reptile shop that I mentioned before, Reptilian Haven, years and years ago. I was 17, 18 years old. There was a pair of Euromast. At the time, they were Euromastix hardwicki or hardwicki, and now they're Sara hardwicki. And they're kind of like, a lot of people don't like them quite as much, but I think they're really cool. To me, they seem like a mix between an Egyptian Euromastix and a butterfly agama. You know, they're just like, they're kind of that elephant gray with the big inguinal patches, but they're kind of long and slender like a butterfly agama. And they have like a shared and common ancestor. But regardless, they were $400 and sat at that shop for 5-6 years. Nobody
Wow.
wanted. It's like, man, you got to be kidding me. Like, in retrospect, it's like, if you had those now, I'd pay $5,000 for those things. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be like, yes, dude, yes.
Yeah.
You know,
No, same thing with the Masobi. I think if you had Masobi right now, regardless if it was wild caught or captive, I mean, the price would be insane and people would pay it.
yeah.
People would pay it. But again, it was a boring. So when I had the group, the coldest room in that house at the time I was living, it was in my children's bathroom.
Yeah.
Because it was the coldest place in the entire house. So they were in a giant, I had two groups in a giant Sterilite tub and two Sterilite tubs in my kids' shower that they did not use.
Okay.
And that's where those animals lived. And I never saw the damn animals because they are so nocturnal that even red Christmas lights, they did not want. You would never see these things. So, I mean, they were doing great. They ate. But
Yeah.
the moment there was even a little bit of light, these things would just freak the fuck out.
Mhm.
They were just not an enjoyable animal to have. And then a part of my mistake was I gave the entire group to one person. And I think, again, hindsight, it probably would have ended up the same no matter what. But if I had split that group up, there could be some today. Who knows? But
Yeah.
I doubt it. But still, you never know.
Yeah.
Crazy, man.
That's why
Hindsight,
even
man.
a lot of the obscure species I have, I'm just sticking with them now. I can tell you how many stories I've had of getting a species and getting rid of it, and then they disappear. So every species I have, I'm just sticking with it, breeding it. Obviously, I have to enjoy the species too.
Sure.
But I want to propagate it in captivity so that there's representation for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Very cool, man. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many species that you can look at now that are just not here anymore. I mean, if you would have told somebody 5 years ago that the Chinese water dragon would be more sought after than the Australian water dragon, they would have thought you were crazy.
Yeah. You'd be
Yeah,
like,
it's true.
"What?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I really appreciate that perspective too, because, you know, I've got a couple of weird things I'm working with over here where it's like, you know, they're not uncommon by any means. They're everywhere. Everywhere. But, you know, like the Schneider skinks and then the sandfish,
Mhm.
it's like, they're like $20 lizards. I'm like, yeah. But like sandfish are dope. They're really wild. I got eggs from them last year, but they didn't hatch, but it was like, okay. You know, it's just only going to take one little change and all of a sudden nobody ever sees sandfish anymore. And it's like, oh, I got to get one of those, you know?
Yeah.
So
and then again, with the Australian water dragons, I mean, a few years ago, I mean, I was selling them for $600 a baby.
Yeah.
Because there was none.
Yeah.
And now that price has dropped dramatically because more people are breeding them. There are several people just, you know, breeding them in huge quantities, which is great for the species. They're no longer a species that's just disappeared. I mean, now they're out there. So in a way, that's a success. But again, the Chinese, they used to be $10. Nobody cared. Nobody wanted them. Nobody even attempted. And now there's none. And now everyone's freaking out.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
So when you try, you can make a species prolific in the hobby. I mean, it's great that the Australian's out there. It's amazing that it's out there and it's represented. I have 3 breeding groups right now. They're a great species. They're a cool species. I'm not complaining about the price shop. I'm just glad that they're out there and that they're no longer lost in the hobby.
Yeah.
Totally.
Right. It's true.
Yeah. There's so many species that's just like, you see it. Just the one person who was working with them, once they stop, they're just gone.
Yeah.
You know, within a couple
Langerworth,
generations.
He passed away. The population got split up, and then they just disappeared.
Yeah.
And he was selling them for like nothing. He was selling them for probably $50 animal. I was told at one point. I was told wholesale was $20 a piece.
Farming him, man. He was just cranking them out.
Thousands a year.
And
then he stopped. Everyone still assumed it was a garbage animal, which I don't like that term, but they looked at it as like a cheap species, and that was it. And then they went from a cheap species to no representation, to non-existent, to a few people, to a very sought after, expensive animal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild when that happens. It's insanity, man. Well, listen, Eddie, we're up at like about an hour 45. And so I think we want to be, obviously, we know it's a little bit later there in Florida. We want to respect your time a little bit. So
yeah, you're good. You're good.
We have one little final question that resembles our original closer, but I think Roy's going to throw it out to you, and then we'll call it.
Yeah, I mean, well, if there's any iteration, any new wrinkle to the question of why herpetoculture for you in the last year since we asked it before, what's
I'm glad you said that. I'm going to say this. What I like. What is the question you always ask everybody? Say it again.
Why herpetoculture?
Okay. Only because you guys joke about it and no one's ever said it. I don't think anyone's ever gave you the answer. Because I fucking want to.
Yes.
All right? That's why. Because I fucking want to and I can fucking do it. That's why. Herpetoculture.
There we go.
Not because since I was a little kid and this and that. No, because I fucking want to. That's why.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That's a good answer, man.
I think
no frills.
Yeah, no, not at all. That one.
Pure honesty.
I've been waiting for someone to say it. No one's ever said it, so I'm going to say it.
Yeah. I think the only other one that I felt was like quite candid and felt really real was Phil Tremper saying it's a disease. You know, all right, I'm here for that. Yeah, like this is great. But I appreciate because I fucking want to. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Oh, that's perfect.
You said it. That's perfect. Well, I'm going to hit it.
Real talk.
Thanks, Eddie. Everyone can find you. I mean, should they look for Lizard Man Eddie now instead of Serpentera or both?
All right. So you can look for my name on Facebook as Eddie Soto, or you can look for Lizard Man Eddie. I just changed it just because I've been Serpentera Exotics since 2007. And I've garnered somewhat of a reputation where people just know me as Eddie.
Yeah.
And when I say Serpentera Exotics, I have no idea who the fuck who I'm talking about.
Okay.
And there's people who've known me for years that don't know Serpentera Exotics, or there's people. So I just said, you know what? I primarily focus on lizards, even though I do other species. I primarily do lizards. Eddie's in the title, Lizard Man Eddie.
Wow.
Easy.
It's perfect, man. It's perfect. It works.
There's some people who don't like it, but it's going to grow on you.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
I like it.
All right.
Lizard Man.
Hit the button.